What's up guys, Brandon here from Gearist. When it comes to the trail running category, Montrail is pretty much the OG in that area. While they certainly have a lot of really great competition today, which you guys see on this channel all the time, their pedigree still runs really deep in that area. And today, we're going to introduce you to a shoe that's getting them back to their hardcore trail crushing roots, and that is the Montrail Caldorado. Starting with the outsole of this shoe, what you can see there is we've got a full contact rubber setup, so this thing is really durable in that area. Now, at the front of the shoe, you can see right here, it starts off with this set of chevrons, these kind of triangular, like dink dink, those little things. And then you can see after that, two basic patterns that dictate the majority of the shoe. On the perimeter, you've got one, and then running down the center, you've got one. Now, the lugs on the perimeter, as you can see, they kind of continue that chevron shape, that angular shape. And in the front of the shoe, they are oriented kind of backward for ascending, for traction this way, and in the rear of the shoe they are oriented for traction when descending. Down the middle of the shoe is something that we've seen before from Montrail when we looked at the Fluid Flex ST, which you can see that review right here. And in that case, what it is these sets of three little squares or cubes, because these are all 5mm deep lugs across the whole entirety of the shoe. Each of these is kind of looks like randomly tossed on there, but what they are is angled so that it's going to account for anything that can be thrown at it, whether it's a straight on angle, some lug on here is going to catch it, straight on, off camera, side angle, what have you. These are all kind of seemingly randomly placed, but they're placed in pods of 3 to form this kind of all-encompassing area. And then as we arrive at the back of the shoe, that same chevron pattern, that kind of scale-like pattern that we saw up here at the toe of the shoe, reappears again to give you some solid traction and a harder rubber, more abrasive resistance, abrasion resistant rather, to account for any of us who might be heel striking in this shoe. The first thing that I'll point out is that I really like this full coverage outsole. It is very durable. Now this has about 40 miles on it. That is on trail, that is dry trail, really rocky. It's also on snow, which you guys have probably seen in some of our Gearist dailies, me running in snow in this shoe. So mud, snow, wet trail, slick rock, really well groomed trails. It's been on pretty much everything, and with 40 miles on it, there are no nicks. I mean, and actually one of the things that I'm going to come about later on the upper of the shoe is that this thing comes very clean somehow. Now I have rinsed it off and taken in water and things like that, but it just comes very clean naturally. So it's really impressive, the durability of the outsole. With regard to traction, since the lugs on this are only about 5mm deep, and I say only, I do realize that's still pretty luggy, but it's not as much traction as a really much more cleated shoe. And while it doesn't affect the overall performance, when you do get on some looser terrain, you can notice the difference there. But that is the case for any shoe that doesn't have deeper and cleat-like lugs. On rockier terrain, whether it's angular or flat, I found the Caldorado to really excel. It's really very fun to run in those situations because it sticks very well to those things, especially when the rocks get more angular. On mud, depending on the type of mud, and here in Colorado, much of what we get on some trails is really clay-like. On that type of mud, it does okay, actually, but then when the mud starts to get deeper and more sticky, they can get kind of compacted into the lug setup. They clean well when you knock them off because, again, these lugs aren't super deep, but again, like any shoe with a lug system, they're probably going to hold on to a little bit of that mud. On the snowier trail runs that I've had this on this year, which again, you guys have seen a few of, it's done really well on that snow. Now, there's kind of a caveat to that. When the snow gets pilly, and so when it's a little bit warmer and the snow starts to break up, but it's still plenty snowy, it starts to slip. But again, that's kind of like that loose rock material that you might expect. Something with a deeper lug or something with a crampon attached to it is going to handle that better. But I felt like I never ran in this with a crampon because I don't want to kind of compromise the experience. And I felt like on compacted snow trails or fresh snow trails, it still did pretty well in terms of the traction. Moving into the midsole of this shoe, it's interesting because this is something that a lot of people, basically all runners, whether you're neutral or you want a little bit of stability, are really going to be able to appreciate. Now the midsole material is Montrail's fluid foam. Now what does that mean? This is basically something where they wanted to put a essentially pure foam in there without any gadgets like pods or what have you in it. So it's a very pure foam front to back, which brings a great consistency of feel. Blended into the fluid foam, and this is a very important distinction right here, it's blended in, it's not like a glued section, is fluid guide technology. Now this is a slightly denser foam that is again blended in with the fluid foam to make a smoother transition. Rather than actually thinking about it as kind of a piece of foam or something in there, you have to think about about it as framing is actually the better way to think about it. And for runners that want a little bit of pronation control for whatever reason, that's going to provide that kind of right in the midfoot area. But for those of us that are dead neutral, like myself, or even supinate a little bit, what it's going to amount to, it's not very intrusive, because I'm pretty sensitive to running in stability shoes, except for on the trail much of the time. And what it amounts to for me is that feeling of more stability, kind of that torsional rigidity that I'm really going to notice when it gets onto off-camber or more rocky and technical terrain. Rounding out the midsole is this bad little guy right here. See this black or dark gray that you can see in between the flex screws in the forefoot there? That is a rock plate, also known as trail shield, in this shoe. I definitely feel like this midsole material, especially with that fluid guide technology, with this full contact outsole, which is really well kind of balanced on the ground, gives you a great sense of stability. Now, not stability in the sense of like a stability shoe or anything like that, but just stability. It's very flat on that ground, and you really feel this kind of confidence in what you're doing. Some of that has to do with the additional torsional rigidity of that fluid guide technology, but some of it has to do, again, with that full contact frame of the outsole. While this is not the most flexible shoe in the world, you can see there it's got a good deal of forefoot flex, but then once you get to the midfoot, again, some of that fluid guide technology, it's not the most flexible thing back there. But what that kind of results in is a little bit of a poppy experience. I mean, you do get quite a bit of response from this. All this while at the same time giving you quite a comfortable and cushiony ride. It's not super cush or anything like that, but it's a very comfortable ride when you get going and you just have that buffed out cruising mileage going on. And finally, with the midsole, for all my spec head friends out there, it is a 19mm stack in the rear foot, 11mm stack in the forefoot for a net drop of 8mm. A little higher than that 6mm threshold that I like to see, but it really feels very pleasant. And again, it's important to remember that on a trail shoe, drop doesn't play in as much as it might on a road. And the reason for that is because you're on a much more dynamic surface. You're on something that's moving up, down, off camber, on camber, what have you. It's really something that is going to keep you on your toes on that forefoot for a large majority of the time anyway, so that drop isn't really going to affect you as much. Moving into the upper of the Colorado, this is a seamless mesh upper with bonded TPU overlays. So use these overlays, which you can't really feel because, well, this is a video. These overlays are actually quite burly. I mean, they're not rigid or anything like that, but they're quite burly. They are really definitely there. It's something that you can, actually, it's pretty tangible, I think is a good word for it. The mesh, which is fairly open on its exterior, you can see there, is actually backed by a finer mesh, which is meant to keep out debris, obviously, and even on dusty trails that I ran in this, I barely noticed any dust, even the fine stuff making it inside, so that's a really good thing. The TPU overlays, I found this really interesting and kind of a really durable feature. This yellow part that underlies the kind of dark gray or black parts right here, that yellow part is a really burly ripstop mesh. I'll hold it to the camera, I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see it there, but it's a really burly ripstop mesh. So not only are you dealing with these TPU overlays that are pretty tough, but you've got this material underlaying it. Now, what that means is that there is a bit of a break-in period in terms of the upper. There's some rigidity when you get it at first, or stiffness. Rigidity is the wrong word. Just kind of upper stiffness, but it does break in over time as you can feel mainly that ripstop mesh begin to break down and become more comfortable. The Caldorado also sports a pretty decent toe cap. You can see right here, it is a mixture of kind of a synthetic TPU and then some rubber material on that. And that made running in snow in this, which this is not a waterproof shoe. I should mention that there is a version of this with OutDry. Now, Columbia is the parent brand of Montrail, so Columbia's patented waterproof material is Columbia OutDry. So there is an OutDry version of this shoe. This is not it. So it made running in snow in this, which you're obviously going to get your feet wet to some degree, especially with an open mesh like this, it made it more tolerable because you're closing off the leading edge of that shoe, which is going to be kind of digging into snow sometimes. Moving into the throat of the shoe, this area right here, there's actually quite a bit of room for cinch down and quite a bit of room to expand. So if you're someone with a wider foot or potentially a bit of a narrower foot, I think that if you've got a really narrow foot, you might have a hard time in this because this is quite a broad shoe in general. But you're going to be able to tighten down to probably right about there. So you can have a little bit of wiggle room for a lower volume foot, but particularly higher volume feet might have less of a hard time getting into this. The tongue, which is gusseted to right about within an inch, you can see that black area right there. So the gusseting starts there and goes down from there. This tongue has a spectacular amount of foam. I am a stickler for this. I don't like overly puffy tongues. This has minimal foam. It's a good density. It protects the foot from the laces if you really like to hammer down hard on those laces. It's just a really, really solid amount, and I like it a lot. I know that's a weird thing to be on about, but I do like it. The collar also carries that really nice amount of foam, and this is something that I think some brands could learn from, in that there's foam here that is protective of the foot, but it's dense rather than thick. So it's a firmer foam when you push on it. It still keeps that level of comfort, because as you compress even softer foams, that softer foam becomes more dense. This is dense out of the gate, so it doesn't interrupt where the foot kind of goes in there. The heel counter itself is actually quite rigid, especially on the back side of it, and the transition down into the heel cup is really nice thanks to this sock liner, which is right here. You can see it's a really deep sock liner on the back there, and provides a really, really great fit feel in the rear of this shoe. Now for the fit, in size 11, I found this to be right where I would expect it to be. Industry standard, size 11, I had no problems, didn't need to go up or down, and it should be right where you would expect your size whatever's to be. As I mentioned just a second ago, the security in the heel cup is nice because that really great and smooth transition down into that really well-shaped footbed, that sock liner in there from the heel counter on the back side. It's a really nice transition, and you feel that security. It's not like you're locked in, but it's like your foot just kind of settles into this nice cup that's set out there for it. The midfoot is a really very comfortable area. I didn't notice any hot spots or anything like that. Didn't feel like I needed to lace down super, super hard. And even when running in wet snow and kind of my feet were getting a little bit of wet, there was no hot spot or chafing or anything like that. Of course, I do wear socks, so that helps. The toe box is actually pretty nice. I mean, there's a solid amount of room there. There's no real extra room for a ton of wiggle and splay, and there's no give to this material in this area, but it is pretty comfortable. I didn't really notice being crammed in there or anything like that. For some reason, and I'm not quite sure why, to be honest, the Caldorado feels a little bit bulky to me from time to time. It is definitely on the heavier side, with my size 11 coming in at 13.3 ounces, but honestly, the weight in this, for whatever reason, doesn't really bother me. It seems like it's more on off-camber terrain where, you feel certainly that stability that the fluid guide technology is offering you, as well as that nice wide platform of the outsole that we've talked about several times. You feel that kind of stability from that, but it also feels like there's a lot of shoe there. It doesn't feel heavy or anything like that, and I don't really know how to explain it, and it doesn't get in my way, but I'm very cognizant of the fact that there's something there that is providing this wide base under me. But this feeling pretty much goes away once you get on level or smooth terrain. It's not really an issue. And again, this is really mostly something that I notice on not just off-camber, but off-camber and rocky, more technical terrain. Now that said, contrary to what it sounds like, I actually really like the ride of this. It doesn't feel bulky. I enjoy the fact that there is quite a bit of pop and response from this midsole fluid foam material. The upper is fully supportive across the board, especially if you get that lacing dialed. It's really nice. And by far, my favorite terrain to run in this is not super technical stuff where you're worried about picking your way around, but it wants to run. So it's kind of that flatter stuff where you are getting the rocks and things like that, but you're also really able to run. This really likes those rocks. It likes to be able to kind of stretch its legs, so to speak, over that terrain and really stick to things, but it also likes to just go. I really like what Montrail's trying to do with this shoe and getting back to its roots, and this shoe really portrays that very well. While again, it is a little bit on the heavier side, the security fit and that response to the midsole actually makes it a livelier shoe than you might expect from something like that. Its price tag of $120 is actually really acceptable to me. I think it's a good price, especially for a shoe with this much durability. It's not the cheapest thing in the world, but it certainly resides right in with its peers. Before we get to the question of the day, guys, please don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe to our channel. That would really, really mean a lot. Here's our question of the day for you guys, and that is, what shoe from Montrail have you tried, if any? Let us know down in the comment section below, because this is an OG trail shoe, and I want to know if it was one of your first trailies or if you've never even been in the brand. We'd love to hear your feedback. Thank you guys so much for spending a few minutes with us today. Please don't forget to like, favorite, share, tell everybody, spread the love about the Gearist channel. That would mean a whole lot to us. Right here are all of our social media outlets. Please follow us on those things. Share to all of your friends. Again, I know I've said that a couple times. And above all, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. If you've got a question for our Ask Gearist segment, don't hesitate to email info@gearist.com or leave a comment down in the comment section below. Thank you guys so much for spending a few minutes with us today, and we will see you next time.